Welcome to Red, White, and Blue. From the right, I'm Gary Polland.
And still on the left, I'm David Jones.
And he's still sitting there. Tonight we welcome two guests to talk about this forthcoming Texas legislative session, and it's an important one. First, Garnett Coleman from District 147, one of the key Democrats in Austin. And we're honored to have Representative Larry Taylor of League City, District 24, and head of the Republican caucus. So these are two players, David. They're going to know what's happening in Austin.
Whatever happens today, I mean, that we can take it to the bank. It's whether it's new districts in Houston, a balanced budget program. It'll all come out today, I'm sure. But first, Garnett, the sad news is we have to tell you it's 101 to 49 with you on the losing end in the House of Representatives. You've spent 20 years, as I recall, getting it to even. This must be the worst year of your life that you're looking at.
Well, it could be described that way. But you know what? In the final analysis, we go to Austin to make better policy for the people of the state of Texas. And 90 to 95% of what we pass has nothing to do with partisan position. And so we'll have debates over, whether redistricting, we'll have debates over, what the best use of state money is in terms of philosophy. But in the final analysis with the budget problem, we have to work on that together.
Well, I want to talk about, with you, Representative Taylor, as head of the Republican caucus. First, congratulations on the victory that I don't think many people expected. I know I was surprised, and I'm a big Republican rooter.
We didn't expect it either, to be honest with you. It was above and beyond our expectations.
So you're sad for Garnett that he's in this difficult spot?
Well, I won't say I'm sad for him. I recognize he's in a difficult spot, but I won't say I'm sad for him.
But 101 people are a lot to keep together. Talk about herding cats.
From a caucus perspective, the herd of cats got a lot larger, and obviously that brings more difficulties in handling that. But we've always had differences of opinions within the caucus, and my role is to try to keep us all kind of going in the same general direction.
Well, what are we going to be looking for when you get to Austin next week, I believe? What's going to be the first signal that you, Larry Taylor, head of a caucus, are going to have an easier session than otherwise we might think?
You're assuming we're going to have an easier session. I mean, I've heard from people who've been there for many, many years. John Whitmire, for example, this is the worst session they've ever seen. That's coming up with all the things coming together in this particular time. So whether you're in the minority party or the in this case the majority party, it's going to be a very difficult session.
Well, so given that, I guess a fair question for both of you is, which position would you rather be in? With Garnett, would you rather have 101 Democrats? Then would you have in control of the Senate and control of the governorship, where you own everything and are responsible for everything, or do you like being in the minority where they can't blame you?
Well, it's really funny. Republicans have been in control of the legislature and state government since 2003. And so now the Republican Party has everything. I thought about maybe just going to like Paradise Island and coming back, and it's still a problem. But that's not what we do. It's important that we work together because this is serious business. And there are solutions that we have to find because you can't balance a budget on just cuts, even with the rainy day fund. And we're going to have to work together to find those common ground.
Excellent transition, I think.
That was excellent, because we want to talk about that next.
What, did you read the agenda here?
All right, well, let's talk.
So, Larry, he just brought up this budget
but
issue.
let me put it in context, because just so our viewers understand, the state of Texas has to have a balanced budget, right? Mm-hmm. And we're coming into this session, and the forecasts are that I guess there's not necessarily a shortfall, but based on what our spending was this biennium, for the next biennium we need between an additional 15 to 25 billion more than the revenue coming in. I think that's a pretty fair statement of the plight we face. Of course, I guess the first comment I would make to you, Representative Taylor, is there a lot of state spending that really is not relevant or necessary given what the state's function is?
Well, I mean, I think any large organization, you're going to find excess spending, and just general bureaucracy grows over time. Texas, I think, if you compare us to other states, is leaner than a lot. Leaner than most, and we have done a good job of trying to keep Texas government services as efficient as possible, but there's always room. I'm on the Sunset Commission. We've been going through a number of agencies, and it's still amazing some of the things you find that agencies are doing beyond what they're supposed to be doing, and wasteful spending and those types of things, and just crazy things that they're doing that you're going, who in the world thought that was a good idea to continue doing it that way? And sometimes you just have somebody looking over their shoulder to say, well, have you considered doing this? It just kind of puts off light bulbs in their head. And they go, yeah, we hadn't really thought of that. And it's amazing how they can get in that pattern.
So we've had our hand out with the feds for a long time. $16 billion surplus money you happily took. It's gone. So when are we going to step up as a state and say we own and owe our citizens something? And we can't just call on the feds to bail us out all the time, which is what we're doing currently. We got more money coming in from the feds than we produce from state taxes.
Well, I would say the bailout money, we didn't ask for it, and if we didn't take it, it was going to go somewhere else. So we did take it, but we could have done some of these cuts last time and started the process sooner. All that did was delay going through what we're going through now, and frankly, it may have extended what we're having to go through now because of the bailout. Every time the government spends money, it takes money out of the private sector, which is jobs and those types of things, which may have prolonged where we are now with our economy.
Okay, so how do we fill the hole?
Well, it's a real challenge. I believe that you have to spend at least 3/4 or 100% of the rainy day fund, because if not, then the cuts would have to be that $25 billion of general revenue, because the impact is on higher education, public education primarily. Also, we don't have enough money for roads, so we have to figure out how to fund that. So let's see what we can do with reasonable cuts without getting down there in the bone and scraping all the marrow out, and make sure that we maintain a good public education system, a good higher education system, and enough money to make sure that our seniors, disabled, and elderly are taken care of. But ultimately, you can't. It's just almost impossible to cut our way out of this.
Well, in 2002, Representative Taylor, didn't we cut our way out
2003,
of it?
yes. My first session, when we took over, we had a $10 billion. It was supposed to be a $5 billion budget shortfall. We got there the day before, and they said it was 10, the comptroller at the time. And we did. We cut, and people said then we couldn't do it, and we did cut, and we took a lot of heat. A lot of the press took a lot of different shots. Every time we turned around, somebody was mad at us about cutting something, and it was a terrible time. But the facts have proven out. The next session, we had a surplus. After making those cuts, our economy was doing better, whereas you look at a lot of other states that chose to go the other path, which is increasing taxes, and that the next session they were there, they're still looking for how to fill up that shortfall.
Why are we so far behind on this, Mr. Coleman? If cuts worked last time?
Well, they didn't. Well, they worked, but a lot of people lost elections because they cut 300,000 children off of CHIP. It was very clear that cutting prenatal care to expectant mothers wasn't good public policy. It was very clear that cutting mental health benefits to seniors and children wasn't good public policy. It was very clear that raising tuition from about $60 a semester hour to now $300 wasn't good public policy. We might even go to $500 a semester hour tuition if you use the same logic. $10 billion times 2 is 20, plus another 5. That's deep cuts. We had deep cuts in 2003, and these deep cuts will have the same results.
Two sources of revenue that I've read about, Gary, that thanks to you and your research, would be casino or track-related gambling interests, bringing in a couple of billion, and then we have sales tax exemptions that maybe you might look at to actually bring in some revenue.
I mean, close the loopholes?
Close the loopholes, right.
I'm on Ways and Means. We sat through all summer of listening to different exemptions and sales tax exemptions and things that we have in our current law. And the biggest one is our manufacturing exemption. And we're not going to get rid of that. I mean, that's what helps to keep us competitive as a state. Manufacturing jobs are the kind of jobs that everybody wants. That's your base that everybody else builds on. So that's kind of difficult.
How about professional services?
Yeah, there may be some
tax
discussion there, but what we've heard from the governor, lieutenant governor, and the Speaker of the House is we're not looking for new revenue sources. We're looking at cutting. And I will say real quick on the gambling, that's not going to be coming in any time in the immediate near future. And really, I'm an optimistic person. I don't think we're going to be in this economy forever. I think things are changing in D.C., and I think the economy is going to start turning around. We have to, and like Garnett talked about, the cuts we made in 2003, we were able to come back in 2005 and fill in a lot of those things once we had the money again. It's just like any family in Texas. When the revenue's not there, you can't just keep spending like it is. And so we had to cut back for a period of time. Even the highway, the funding for highways, this may not be the session to fix and catch up on highway funding. We may have to put that off till next session because there's just not the money there. When you're looking to cut, I'm hoping it's somewhere closer to $20 billion, but we'll find that out probably
Well, it
next
could be
Monday.
$15 billion. I mean,
Yeah.
you'll only have a number.
And a number of folks have said that they think it's a lower number than
So,
that.
Garnett, Garnett said he would drain the rainy day fund. It's $10 billion. If it's $10 billion shortfall, take it. We're okay. We can fund the things we need to fund, but that would also entail, Garnett, correct me if I'm wrong, making decisions on priorities. Because I'm sure medical costs have gone up. So all the states' involvement with medical is more than what it was 2 years ago, for example.
Well, guess what? What's really interesting is the $850 million extension of the FMAP, that's the matching rate on Medicaid. Quite frankly, that closed the shortfall for this biennium, thanks to the federal government. We haven't closed that shortfall on Medicaid and other programs for the next biennium. But it's very clear that the insurance companies are making more money, and since they're the biggest cost in health care, they keep ratcheting up the cost of health care. And so what I'm concerned about is that everybody understands that everybody has to lose some. And that means people have to pay more. They have to pay co-pays and co-insurance. That means insurance companies make less, and that means providers make less, and everybody shares the burden. In this particular session, it would be providers that get the hit. That means doctors, hospitals, and the like, because the target are their fees. What they get reimbursed for providing health care.
So what happens when you do that? They quit doing it.
They quit doing it, and then you gut the program.
Or then people wait forever to get services.
Right, and those people,
also known as rationing.
And let's be clear, the biggest expense in Medicaid are nursing homes for our elderly, and home care and institutional care for the disabled. And that is 70% of the Medicaid cost. So when everybody thinks it's somebody out here that could be working, these are people who have no other alternative. And that's the reason why they're on Medicaid. And that's something we have to be very clear that some of these cuts aren't good. Some of these folks that got elected that, ran out there and saying, I'm going to give you this and I'm going to give you that, and then said, we're going to have limited government. When they get back with 50 kids in a classroom or 45 kids in a classroom, they won't be back.
So what I hear everybody saying here, and it seems like Garnett might be conceding this ground to you, Mr. Taylor. I haven't heard about the conscience yet on the Democratic Party side coalescing about something, but it seems to me like everything is going to fall on 9-year-olds who, maybe are going to drop out of school because they've got 50 kids in their class. Kids who can't get medical attention, maybe there's people with transplants who are going to be cut off, they're going to die quicker. That's where we're going?
Well, let me tell you, when we have economic downturns like this from a government perspective, it's painful and nobody likes it and nobody asks for it. But this is really an opportunity to rethink how we do things. We get in these rhythms and patterns of doing things the same way we've done it for the last 20, 30 years. And everyone knows about government. If you just continue feeding the beast, it'll take everything you give it and ask for more. And that's just the way it works in government. So having these economic downturns every now and then is actually a healthy process for government to go through, where they have to look inwardly and see, how are we doing what we're doing? Are we really doing things we really need to be doing?
Which is a good point. And
then
do you agree that?
I'm rethinking the enterprise fund right now.
Okay, that's one thing.
That's the governor.
Should the state of Texas be given money to cities and counties to fund experimental programs?
They don't.
Well, just after the question.
Well, they don't.
Yeah, actually, they do.
But I don't. But what I'm saying to you, county governments fund themselves. I'm chair of county affairs, by the way, and city governments mostly fund themselves. If it is a pass down of federal money, then that's the way.
For example.
Okay, give me an example.
State of Texas funds this the public defender group in Austin. Some organization gets set up through Rodney Ellis that gets state funding, and they're giving Harris County $4 million for next year or this year for them to encourage them to have a public defender. That's $4 million of state money. And so that's why my question was,
and
should the state be paying for it?
It's subject to the cuts. Just like I said, the $275 million of the enterprise fund and the other...
You put those in the same area.
Well, I'd put those in the same area.
I
would say to you that if we're looking at priorities, is it really a good point, a good policy to subsidize billionaires like Mr. McNair that owns the The Texans.
Is that because they had a bad year? You're saying?
No, I'm saying it because
Pick on an easy target.
his company Lexicon has gotten $150 million shared with A&M for researching a drug that they have no results from. And that's been state taxpayer dollars.
Okay,
So we're going to look at fat cats
You
as
$4
well
million,
as...
$150 million. I don't know. What do you think?
What do you think,
you throw 'em
Mr.
all
Taylor?
in the
We're going to
same
look at
bucket.
fat cats in this session? Is there are any?
It's going to be across the board. I mean, that's already been evidenced by what's been done so far trying to take care of this biennium. The enterprise fund will be looked at and analyzed. Where there's waste, it's going to be cut. But you also have to look at where there's benefits. It is an investment. If we're getting more jobs coming here, one of the best ways to come out of an economic slowdown is to grow yourself out of it. So
It
jobs
brings in
is
more
key.
revenue.
Well, let me
That's
add
true.
something to that.
So we will have to analyze from that cost benefit.
And I'm for, clearly catalyzing business. But what we know is the biggest employer in rural Texas is the hospital and the school district.
Or the prison system.
In the prison system, which is bad. But the other part is that a healthcare dollar turns 3 times in a community, and it creates economic opportunity as well. And that money goes, when somebody goes, the worker at the hospital, because that's the one that's getting paid, when they go grocery shop, they're making sure that a checker gets a job. So there are many ways to create jobs. And one is by providing good services and being humane as well.
Your expertise is in the medical services area, as I remember. What will the state of Texas do in either fighting or participating in the creation of this new healthcare system as a result of the law that was passed last year in Congress?
Well, under the new health law, what we would have to do this session is pass an exchange. And that's an exchange where people go in to figure out which health insurance policy they want to buy, compare it apples to apples, plus that's where they find out how to apply for a subsidy if their income is less. And if the state doesn't pass an exchange, the federal government will do an exchange. Now,
Does it cost anything for us to set it up?
they're
They're giving us some money to do that.
Yeah, the federal government is giving us money to do it. And
Our money, by the way. It's not
Well,
like
at
money
least
from heaven.
but at least that money isn't going to Chicago or to someplace else.
Except Garnett, that the new Republican House has said they're going to defund Obamacare.
Well,
so then maybe the money won't be coming.
Well, let's do this. I think I count very well because I do know math. Representative Christian has his constitutional nullification amendment, which it doesn't pass constitutional muster, quite frankly. But the other piece is, just like we have the House and the Senate in Texas, there are not enough Republican votes to repeal the health care
But
law.
there is enough votes to defund.
Well, there may be. We'll see.
And Larry Taylor, you remember how it is when the state found that there was too many kids in detention in state detention centers, prisons.
TYC.
TYC. There were reforms made. The detentions numbers are down. Could the same kind of analysis be made about Texas prisons that are some say are bloated, and that with diversion programs and substance abuse programs at the local level, we could actually defund some prisons?
We've looked at some of that. It's just a very sensitive and delicate issue when you start talking about letting people out of prison that some people think should be there. So it has to be very carefully done. And we have, in the last couple of sessions, gone through and made some changes to some of the sentencing guidelines to let some of the people come out sooner that aren't a threat to society. But people aren't we talk about reducing the budget. We can't reduce our prison workers' days of work because you can't have a couple days off where the
Couldn't
prisoners-
furlough the guards.
or the inmates are running the asylum, so to speak. You're not going to allow that to happen.
Well, it's
so
really-
there are some cuts you can't make, and they're already pretty lowly paid. If you look at what our prison
They're
guards
very
are making.
badly paid.
So that's not an area that we're looking. Okay, we're going to chop 50% there. That's just not possible.
Well, this is where the problem comes in. The shortfall is in general revenue, state tax dollars. So we have about $80 billion we spend now over 2 years, $40 billion a year, $40 billion a year. If it's 20, we're going to try to do a year with $30 billion, what we used to do with $40 billion. If it's 25, then the reality is that we take 12.5 billion from 40. You're at 28. And so the point I'm making is that that's what we're actually talking about. And we just don't have enough of it. And I don't know how you protect the prison guards, not put 40 kids in a classroom learning geometry, not raise college tuition to $500 a semester. By the way, all of these are paid for by general revenue. And that's really the issue. That's the conundrum. And I agree with Larry. We don't want to let people out on the street. We can divert people going in. But goodness gracious, you have to have enough money to do that. And so that's where the priorities come in. One of the priorities should be safety of our.
All right, so you empty the rainy day fund, and let's say it's
and
you cut all you can cut.
We're not going to cut. We're not going to empty the rainy day fund. We may do half of it, but even on education, that's our number one budget priority. But there are many things we can do in education. For one, I'm asking the school districts within my district, to give me reports on the mandates we passed to the state that we didn't fund. Even if we can't give them more money, if we can reduce the mandates they're living under and open some of those things up where they can reduce their expenses, we've helped them with making their budgets. And even textbooks. There's things we're doing with 100-year-old technology that we could do so much better. We've already paid to wire these classrooms. It's time to start using that technology.
Scott Heiberg did a good job working on wiring the classrooms and looking at Kindles and looking at different ways of providing whatever the case may be.
What about the big task that you have coming up as well after you've balanced the budget? Is redistricting.
Actually, that's the most important task for a politician.
Okay, so are we going to have a redistricting bill, Mr. Taylor? Do you think, or are you going to punt?
I think we are. No, I think we are. We're going to give it our best effort, and we're going to try to draw a map that's fair for all Texans.
What are you going to do for us in Houston here with those new congressional seats that are available?
Well, we have 4 new congressional seats, and depending on how I haven't looked at the details of how the map is as far as where the significant growths are. I mean, we know generally. But we'll add congressional seats in those areas.
You think we'll have any new seats in our region,
2.
Mr. Coleman?
I think we'll have 2. One will be west-southwest, and that'll probably be a Democratic district, and one will be west-northwest, and that'll be a Republican district. And then Dallas and San Antonio. I mean, the reality is we are the biggest growth. I think the issue is that hasn't been brought up, is Harris County, under the numbers, might lose a state House seat. It will go from 25 to 24. And so those are some issues that we're going to...
So who volunteers to walk the plank?
I don't know.
You're probably in Galveston as well.
His hair's growing like crazy. He's got too many people.
And the deal is that, somebody may retire and it makes it all easy. I would prefer the legislature pass a map than the LRB, Legislative Redistricting Board, draw the map. But the reality is the state house lines, the state senate lines, the congressional lines will all be finally drawn by what is called the good old federal courts and go all the way to the Supreme Court, and that's when we'll get the final.
We only have a couple of minutes for politics, Gary. Have you forgot about that?
No. Politics is important, David.
Larry, you have to tell us whether or not we're going to have a governor that's going to be paying attention to this session, or one that is running for president and leaving it to the.
I would have to take
to Larry Taylor.
He said he's not running for governor, but whether he is or doesn't even know he's going to, I think it's imperative that he pay attention, because that's not going to help anybody in any future office if they didn't pay attention to the last job they had. I've always felt like the best way to earn another job is to do a really good job with what job that you have, rather than using the job you have to get the next job.
And it looks like the governor's hired a bunch of, former people who work for Governor Dewhurst to help him. Your take, is Governor Perry going to run for president?
I think he doesn't know yet, but I believe he's been tapped as the bulldog to go after Obama. And by being seen as someone who might run for president, it puts him on a semi-equal playing field.
Have you read his book?
No.
Okay.
Did you vote for him?
No. But, look, we all do this, and we know the parts of it that are politics. And Governor Perry, for what it's worth, is he enjoys being in public office.
And a great politician. And you have to take your hat off to him.
The last thing anybody wants to do is underestimate his ability. No, it's just true. He's very good at this. I've told some people in Washington, he's very good at this. Don't stop underestimating people because you don't understand them.
Well, Mr. Taylor's glad to hear that you're giving Obama a heads up about this, because he's counting on Obama to save us with this new economy that he says is
I'm not
on.
planning- no, actually,
you just said a while ago you think
I'm
the
counting
economy's on the way back.
Congress turn the economy around. I don't think President Obama's going to do it at
And
all.
you surely are happy that the two sides are working together in Washington now, aren't you?
When Obama comes over this way, I'll be happy when they start working together.
The most important thing for us is that the Texas government doesn't become like the
Exactly.
federal government, whether it's Republicans or Democrats. Because quite frankly, the reason they can't get anything done is they put politics before policy.
There's a place for politics, but not most of the session's supposed to be dealing with politics.
I think Texans should be proud of the legislature that they have. We do work together. We can have very vigorous debates, and then we can have dinner together afterwards. And you do not see that kind of relationship in D.C., and I think it's healthy.
Well, catch
Okay,
him in
well, you'll get the check after the show.
It'd be like to meet him in the
Thanks for
Bahamas.
being with
Where
us.
he'll be hanging.
And we invite you to visit our home online at HoustonPBS.org. Click on the local program bar at red, white, and blue. Read about our guests, watch the shows along with a follow-up discussion, and until next time, get informed and get active.